Our upcoming trip to China is a good example of how, when you're in the hedge fund business, you have to sometimes do things that don't seem very straightforward. It's like you can't have a linear development of your actions. There is no cause and then effect and cause and effect. It's sometimes a little bit different, and this is a good example because we're going to China. The goal is to learn about China as a country, the culture, the technology, the science, everything we can possibly learn from China within the realms, of course, of what they want us to know. So we don't want to break any laws or anything like that. But there's a lot to learn from China, whether it's how they eat, how they order their coffee, how they park their cars, how they drive their cars, or whether it's how they do research. We're interested in AI and robotics, so this is going to be our focus. But that's not necessarily the main reason why we're going. And I want to talk about this a little bit because the purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. So long-time listeners hopefully have gotten a sense of how we often diverge into very different topics. We talk about literature, we talk about philosophy, then sometimes we talk about earnings calls, and we talk about academic papers. So we're in the knowledge business. So the knowledge business is, as Naval says, it's a living in the arena business. That's how knowledge is created. So you actually have to do things. You have to actually go to Beijing and actually try to meet people and see for yourself what it looks like. That's the only way to learn what Beijing is about. And the same applies to Shanghai and Shenzhen and Hong Kong and wherever else we plan to go. So fundamentally, our main goal is to come back after probably about 3 weeks and really understand the zeitgeist of China. That's the goal. Like, have a good sense for how they live, what they do, what's going on. The reason we picked China over other countries is because we believe China is the only country that is able to compete with parts of the US, in particular Silicon Valley and Texas, which are really the two main sort of wealth creation areas today in the world. So China and then Texas, Silicon Valley. Let's call it the deep tech state, which is kind of a wordplay on the deep state, but it's a positive spin. The deep tech state. So these are areas of maybe deep tech regions. Deep tech region is better because state has this negative connotation. So call it deep tech region, where people go to university and learn difficult things that they then apply to actual technologies. That's the main thing that we're focused on as a fund. That's the main thing that we look for when we talk to people. We're not interested in academia for academia's sake, and we're certainly not interested in businesses for business's sake. We're interested in deep tech, solving very difficult problems, whether it's Starship, whether it's self-driving, whether it's new materials for batteries, new materials for solar cells, whether it's better compute, new materials for quantum computing. So really difficult problems, a lot of high level academic work, which translates into real applications. That's where we live in the sort of action space. It's not the only place you can make money, certainly not, but it's the most interesting place because it combines the things that we really care about as investors and that as humans, actually, not as investors, which is curiosity, learning, application, problem solving, risk, and wealth. Those are sort of the words, probably a couple more words I forgot, but that's kind of where we live. And the reason we're going to China is to find out about how they deal with risk, how they deal with wealth, how they deal with knowledge, how they deal with solving difficult problems, how they deal with failure. Like, trying to really get a sense for the culture there that is being applied towards deep tech. That's the goal. And once we have a goal, I think it becomes easier, not easy, but easier to go to a place like that. We barely speak any Mandarin. I would say very broken Mandarin. And we have no contacts whatsoever, nothing to speak of. Nevertheless, I think we can start somewhere and talk to people and see again along the lines of deep tech. That's the interest. That's the goal. To understand how does China relate to deep tech. That's the goal. Once we have a good goal, I think we can also learn a lot. So I guess the message here that we're trying to give people is, do unusual things, do quirky things, but set yourself some good goals, because once you have a good goal, it's a lot easier to accumulate the kind of knowledge that this perception, that the pursuing of that goal brings with it. The definition of intelligence, according to John McCarthy, is the computational part of an agent pursuing goals. So we look at it that way. Like, what we're doing here is really gathering intelligence, literally intelligence in a way that we don't want to know trade secret or anything like that. We're not crazy. We would never do that. What we're really interested in is, again, it's understanding how China as a culture relates to deep tech, because that's what we care about. We have a sense for how we relate here in Silicon Valley. We have a bit of a sense for how people in Texas relate to it. Those are the only two places where deep tech is being pursued. And then we have a little bit other places on the West Coast. Of course, there's El Segundo in LA, and there's Seattle, where certainly some deep tech is happening. And then there's China. So we want to understand what's the zeitgeist. The mid-20s of the 21st century are the beginning of deep tech. We hope it's going to continue. We're pretty sure that it's going to create a lot of wealth if it continues. So we want to be part of that. Thank you.